Hi, I'm Mary McNamara with the Los Angeles Times. Welcome to our Emmys Contender Chats. And today we have Michael Angarano, or
Perfect.
Angarano,
Yeah.
depending on how you're feeling. And he is from This Is Us. This season, season 3, he made his debut as the mysterious Nick Pearson, Jack's brother, who we had been told, as had all the characters in the show, been told that you were dead, you had died in the war. And this season we learned that that is not the case. So what was it like to join this very intensely viewed, emotionally viewed show in season 3 as the character who comes back from the dead?
Well, I mean, as far as anticipating what fans would think or what people's reactions would be, that was something I tried to not really worry about, considering that if you do, then your own expectations would slightly be managed. But it wasn't actually the first time I came onto a show when it was really popular. When I was 13, I was on Will and Grace at the end of season 3 when it was really big, and it was this sort of big reveal in the season finale. So I had a little bit of experience coming onto a show that was already off and running, that was already sort of this cultural phenomenon. But on This Is Us, it was really easy because I was working with Milo a lot, and Milo.
You're friends with him.
I'm friends with Milo beforehand. I'm friends with Chris Sullivan. It was a really welcoming group, and it was just this great material. The script that I read was really rich, and I felt like it was one of the best things that I had ever read. So, going through hair and makeup tests, going through wardrobe, meeting the crew for the first time, getting familiar with everybody, it was really welcoming, and it was sort of humbling and encouraging. I felt very safe. I felt very taken care of.
Well, and you, because you are in the past, but you're the medium Nick, because there was a young Nick and now there is an older Nick, but you're the medium Nick, and we see you mostly, although we see you somewhat at home, before, but mostly it's in Vietnam. The story is about how Jack and Nick sort of meet up in Vietnam after Nick has been drafted, which he really did not want to be drafted. And what was that like? I mean, that scene, in the bar where you're waiting for the lottery to be announced. I mean, that's something I had forgotten. Do you know that that's how it was done?
Yeah.
That young men had to basically sit and watch television to know whether they were going to be called up. I mean, obviously they also got letters, but I mean, that kind of event.
Yeah. I mean, there was nothing in my lifetime or in my experience that I could compare it to.
Did you talk to anybody who had been drafted that way?
I mean, my father was too young. My uncle was sort of the age, but he didn't get drafted. But Tim O'Brien was a consultant in the writers' room during the show, and he wrote the seminal book, The Things They Carried, which is one of the great Vietnam War books ever. And he also co-wrote the script, which was the script that, in which Nicky gets drafted. And he was also on set that day. And so, it was one of these things that, as an actor, I didn't really have anything to relate it to, but because it was so high stakes. And one of the things that Ken Olin, the director of that episode, kept saying to Milo and I, he was like, don't play the relationship between the brothers. We're going to know you guys are brothers. That speaks for itself. We know the history. You guys have chemistry. We see the character dynamic. We see it. Play the draft, because this is what is going on, and this is what was going on. This is the all-consuming thing that especially young men were going through at this particular time. There was something actually that I found that helped a little bit. It was this website that you put your birth date into, and it would tell you if you were drafted. And I found out that I would have been
You would have been
drafted, and Milo would have been drafted. And what really turned it around was when I realized that my younger brother, who's 19, would have been drafted as well. And that, that sort of 2-second moment where my stomach sank, and I realized, like, oh, it wouldn't be me that's going to war; it would be my brother. That's really where it helped me realize that, what this was and the effect that it had on these guys' lives at such a young age.
I mean, in that scene, when you were saying that about that direction to play it as the draft rather than the relationship, I felt very much that in a show that's about interconnected relationships and the closeness of family, and those brothers had been portrayed as very close, you could see Nick withdrawing from Jack because this is his deal. Yeah. It's like, this is not something they can share, even though Jack is trying to enlist so he can be with Nick. It's like, when you're going to go, it's your own thing, and you see that in the car ride. And I wanted to ask one question. In the car ride, you say, you have that line, which is basically the whole show, which is like, haven't you ever wondered if we did this in reverse, how we got to here? Yeah. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, I think it was some really beautiful writing on the writer's part, because it clearly delineated Jack and Nikki. And Nikki's, of course, everybody, you either get drafted or you don't. And that's not something, Jack can't do anything to help Nikki with that. He tries, but it's something that Nikki takes on and realizes that he has to take on his own. And that also plays into their dynamic as older brother, younger brother, as protector, as protectee, as this sort of complex that Nikki has in his head that he's not really his own man. And I think that hugely informs his decision to actually go to Vietnam, because he knows that this is something that he has to do on his own. And I think you could see once he gets there and once Jack gets there, the difference in personalities, that Nikki, from the second he realizes what is happening to him, and it's very much happening to him, he feels like a victim in this greater narrative storyline that he has no control over. Jack is the complete opposite. He's very proactive in this, and he enlists, and he's sort of creating this narrative, and he's going to go and he's going to save his brother. It just speaks to the personalities of these two guys, and while they care so much for each other and they love each other so much, but at the same time, this manages to be the stake. Right. That really bifurcates them as brothers, that really separates them, and as men as well. Right.
And when we meet Nikki, then when Jack finds Nikki, he is addicted to drugs. He's like kind of a wreck. He's also been a medic. So did you create a backstory for him? Like what had happened when he first got there? And he talks a little bit about that in that incredibly moving speech where you talk about why you have the animosity towards the villagers.
Yeah. I did and I didn't, in the sense that there's something that I don't think you could really replicate as far as where somebody like Nikki's headspace is at. You take this dynamic with Jack and you take him enlisting and you take the anxiety of being in a foreign country that, it's not like today where you could just Google Vietnam or just, you're in a foreign place and on the other side of the country, on the other side of the world, and then you're at war, and it was that war. And then add drugs and the fact that you're being sort of prescribed, or you're prescribing yourself uppers and downers just to cope, just to keep yourself awake, just to put yourself to sleep. To say that he's a shell of himself emotionally and mentally is a huge understatement. So to me, I tried to embody it physically as much as I possibly could, and that, they describe Nikki as very gaunt when Jack first sees him, so that was really important to me. And then, but you can't really, that level of tension and anxiety and trauma that he's been through by the time Jack gets to him, it's something you can only step into, or step out of in your own sort of headspace, if that makes sense. I mean,
no, absolutely. It's like, but it is, thinking about it, it's one of the most intense roles. You kind of came in. I mean, Nicky doesn't get a break. It's like you only see him smile like a couple of times, and it's like that must have been, just a really intense period. How long did you shoot, and how did that sort of work? Where did you shoot, by the way?
We shot like an hour and a half outside of LA, or we were, their studios are
where MASH was.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, not quite Malibu, but somewhere outside of LA, and it really helped. It felt like we were not making This Is Us. It felt like we were making this story, and they also went to Vietnam to shoot a lot of stuff there as well, but. It was intense. I mean, it was about 4 months for me, 4 or 5 months. And I was speaking with Griffin after his first day, actually, and my last day. We overlapped one day on set.
Griffin plays the older.
Griffin Dunn plays older Nicky Pearson.
Exactly.
And, Griffin and I have known each other for almost 15 years.
Were you disappointed that you didn't get to play older Nicky?
No, I knew from the start that they were going to search for an older actor. And especially with this part, I felt like it was really appropriate because there's just, miles and miles and years and just a lot of experience in that man's life that I think an older actor would do a better job of, kind of putting his finger on. But for the most part, I had gone through this stuff, and the days were long, and Milo and I were exhausted, and physically exhausted as well, but really emotionally exhausted. Like there were days where we would show up on set, and sometimes it would be there, and sometimes it wouldn't. And I mean, like, oh, this is not something that we could just show up and shoot.
So what did you do when it wasn't there?
We'd stop and just take a second to realize what's going on and try different things. And, it actually always came back to the writing. It really always came back to, we would try and go around it, or maybe we thought it wasn't right and something, but we really took the time to make sure that whenever we left, we felt like we got it. And sometimes it was a fight to get it. It felt like we were climbing up a hill a little bit, but that also felt appropriate. It didn't. Those days, I would sometimes talk to Milo after, and I would say, that feels like, we gave it the time it needed. Like you can't just show up and that just appears. And
you've known him for a while. Have you worked together?
Yeah, we did a film together called Wild Card, but that was 6 years ago, and we didn't really work together on it. We sort of overlapped as we were filming it, and we came in and out, and we would catch up and get some dinner and stuff. But we've been friends since then. But this was, nothing like this.
Did that help, being friends?
It helped immensely.
Okay, it didn't get in the way.
No, I think it really, really, really helped. It only informed it in ways that we were probably not even aware of. I think there was just I actually asked him. It was the second day of us shooting, and we were shooting pre-Vietnam, the stuff in the Pearson house. And I asked him, I said, does it feel weird to you? Because this feels really right to me. And it almost feels like we're putting on a parallel universe of, almost like a play in a parallel universe. Like it feels like this Pearson dynamic has always existed. And he said the same thing. He goes, no, it feels totally right. Again, it just goes to the writers, how good they are, and how they hand you like really dimensional characters to work with a lot of backstory and just so much. They've given you everything. When the time you get to set, it's like it's most of it is there, But with Milo, he was just incredibly generous, and especially the stuff we were doing was exhausting. Oh, back to Griffin. So Griffin, he had worked his first day, and we were having dinner, and he was just like, man, I gotta tell you, I'm exhausted. And he goes, I only had one scene, and I'm exhausted. And I go, I know, it's exhausting. He's like, well, yeah, it's like, it's a miserable character in a really beautiful way, in a really complicated and wonderful way. He's you know, Nicky is a world unto himself. And so it was really almost validating when I heard Griffin say that, because it had been my experience in the last 4 months, and I thought maybe it was Vietnam, maybe it was all the working outside and being in the water and doing, all these scenes, but it really is just the headspace of this guy.
So you were both shooting at the same time, or you were on set at the same time?
For a day.
For a day?
Yeah.
And you weren't doing the Vietnam part. How does that work?
We were doing the
that
trailer
must be kind
stuff.
of, that's like Doctor Who, like going back and seeing your old...
It's bizarre. There was a day where all generations of Nicky were on set at the same time.
Really?
Yeah, and we shot, just in the same location, just over like 4 hours. We were all there, getting like in makeup and just getting our makeup off, and it was bizarre.
So did you watch or did you read the pages about the young Nicky? Because like the young Nicky scenes were also very telling.
Yeah.
It's like, how much of a relationship did you feel like you needed to have with past Nicky and future Nicky? I mean, it really is kind of a unique situation for an actor to be in.
It is, and also that's what's amazing about the show. You just have to watch. Like all your backstory is there. But yeah, like I was really curious. I was really curious about younger Nicky's relationship with older Nicky and watching the younger actor play him. And Griffin felt the same way. But there was this serendipitous thing where people thought Griffin and I had gotten together beforehand to work out, character traits or gestures or something like that. And we didn't. It was something that was just inherent in the writing that I think...
What were some of the gestures?
I don't know, but people told both of us on that day, they were like, you guys are eerily doing one another. And like, it felt like I was doing Griffin, and Griffin felt like he was doing me, or that we were just informed in some sort of singular way, but it was all through the script, because we didn't have that time. We shot so fast.
So is medium Nicky coming back?
I'm
middle-aged Nicky?
optimistic. I don't know for sure. And even if I did or didn't, I don't think I could say, but I
You have to kill me.
yeah, it would be, I think there's a show like this, there's always a possibility.
Right, because you actually played Nicky in 3 time periods, right? Before the war, during the war, and then after the war when he and Jack have their confrontation.
Yeah, I was 44 in those flashback forward flashy moments.
You pulled that off. Yeah.
Well, that's nice. I
Your
felt
baby
like
face.
It was an interesting, a really fun, interesting thing to do, because 44, you're still sprightly. Think of my father and cousins. 44 is not that much greater than 31 I am now. It's like some similarities, and you're still pretty able. It's not like you're walking
still,
around with a limp.
No, but you're like, you've been through a war and you're kind of a drug addict. It's like still yeah.
Sure.
Was
no.
he a drug addict? You were drinking. Nicky was drinking.
Yeah, he also had a relationship with some drugs.
Yeah. So what was I going to ask? Did you, in terms of the alcoholism and the drug, did you talk to anybody about that? Did you what would that be like? What were they using in Vietnam? What would be the...
Yeah, I did a good amount of research on that. There's so much material about Vietnam, and but there's so much, and yet you feel like it doesn't come close to what it actually felt like. There was also this book called Dispatches that Michael Eyre wrote. That was an amazing book that sort of gave you the sensation or the feeling of what it was like for the sleep-deprived, traumatized, drug-riddled mind. There was, uppers and downers were prescribed to soldiers as far back as World War I and II, and you know, this is
Civil War. They were all addicted to laudanum.
yeah, like this is really common, which it's not something I was too educated on or really knew about. They don't teach you that in in history.
You don't usually get to the Vietnam War in
No.
history. It's very weird.
But it was the reason, it was like Nicky's mind and his personality was that of an addict. And I think Jack is also, had his issues with alcohol in the show. And so it was the history of like how these guys grew up
Right.
in sort of an abusive home with an alcoholic father. And then you learn about the father's relationship to alcohol and how that started. So it's sort of that codependency that that was really important to me. That I think is in the scene where Jack comes to see Nicky in Vietnam for the first time. That was one of the harder scenes of the entire show to me.
Because
in my experience, that was the one where we had to take a couple hours to figure out.
where they first see each other?
Yeah, because it's everything. It just says everything. It says where he's been, where he doesn't want to be, his relationship with Jack, how he is so relieved to see him, and how that also, it's so clear that he's put up this shell of himself. He's put up this wall, and he's hiding behind, he's just surviving. He's just surviving on these drugs, and he's just really trying to cope and not feel and numb himself. And Jack breaks through that, and Nicky can't afford that, or else he knows he'll die, and it might be on his own, by his own hand or somebody else's, but he knows that crack in the armor that Jack's presence means to him is potentially more deadly than Jack not being there.
Mm-hmm. How is it filming the scene in the boat with the kid? I mean, that it was such a horrible scene to watch, very difficult scene to watch. How was that? Did you do it in pieces so it didn't feel like,
No, we didn't actually. We shot it pretty, you hear about how that storyline, when I first heard about it, I thought it was horrific. And it is. It's just incredibly dark and sad and really unexpected. Like, that was one of the amazing things. Like, you're a part of a show that there are fan theories about this.
Oh no, they're total fan theories. Did Nicky has he driven by their house? Like the fact that you said in that, you've got a nice house and everybody's like, has he seen their house?
Right. But the fact that there are fan theories and thousands of people on a daily basis coming up with their own stories about what's going on with these characters, and then the writers come up with something that nobody thought of and nobody anticipated.
Right. What happened to make Jack say he was dead?
And I know that story came directly from Tim O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a very personal story. And you know that it's personal when it's not even in any of his books. It's a little bit in the things they carried. He talks about grenade fishing a little bit. Mm-hmm. But that's happened. And whether that exact thing happened, that story exists somewhere. And so that was one of those things that we filmed, and it was 6 a.m. on a Wednesday in the middle of this lake in LA, and that was it was surreal. It was surreal, but it was also that entire sequence was actually pretty surreal. That last episode was all of those episodes were intense, but that was particularly a blur as far as like the things that we're getting down,
right?
The things that we're putting on camera. But yeah, and that was physically grueling, because
Were you in the water a lot?
Yeah, and that water was not warm.
Yeah.
That was like 50-degree water out in some lake reservoir in the middle of California. That was not cold. I mean, that was not warm water. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of days that I think the elements of all of that actually really inform the scene, and informed me anyway. It really helped. You know,
Yeah.
you're not in the comforts
the shivering
of a
was not fake.
yeah, you're not in the comforts of a Paramount soundstage.
Right. I mean, just thinking about it really is like what an intense experience for an actor. So let's talk about some lighter things as long as we've got you here. So what was it like? You mentioned that you also joined the cast of Will and Grace in the 3rd season as Jack's son, since apparently you will only be a relative of a man named Jack.
Yeah.
And then you came back again with the rest of the cast for the reboot. And so what was that like? I mean, you were still a kid when you were in the 1st season, and now you are a grown-up man, an actor. And so what was that like?
Well, that was bizarre because they haven't changed at all. And
it is kind of scary.
I was like the signpost of change. You know, I showed up on set and I felt like I had been the one that entered the time capsule, and they all stayed outside of it. But I'm like, yeah, it was weird. It was very strange, and it was also bizarre because, you know, in that episode where I came back, I had a son, and he was the age that I was when I first joined the show, and so that was strange because it was the first time that I had a son as an actor, and you know, that's also really cool and odd, but at the same time, I was, you know, the adult in this adult teenager dynamic, and so it was sort of surreal, but also like weirdly cathartic in a way. It felt like putting. It's like bookending a chapter of my life that I was really grateful for. That's really, you know, made me or helped me evolve into the person that I am today. Like those actors were such great examples of what I wanted to be as an actor and a performer. And so to have the opportunity to be that for somebody else, that was really cool.
Well, you've been acting since you were a very small child, and
I was
you
5 when I started.
yes,
Yeah.
and I mean, so that transition, not everybody makes it, and even there is like, when you were talking about like being the first time that you had a child, that must be very strange that you must still be used to being the youngest person. I mean, because you were for so long.
Yeah.
Also, before I forget, I want to thank you personally for Sky High, which I really liked.
Oh,
and I
great.
still have my Sky High backpack somewhere.
you?
Yes, I do, that I got as like a film writer at the time. Yeah, I really like that movie.
It's a good movie.
I still like that movie.
It's a good movie. It's a really, really fun movie. And we had, I think what makes that movie so great for me to watch is that we had so much fun making it, and you could really tell. That's a perfect example of something where you're like, yeah, that really helps when you're enjoying yourself so much.
And it sort of was like a preface to, or like years ahead of like all the shows now.
Yeah.
You know, all the superhero shows,
Totally.
the Umbrella Academy or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like there was Sky High was first, and it was very sunny and optimistic and
Yeah.
fun. So can you talk a little bit about what that's been like, sort of, you know, when was the moment you realized you're not a kid actor anymore? When was the moment when you're like, you know, have you been asked to play younger still? I mean, or are you done with that? Or
Yeah, it's funny. It's, you know, they always say like, you know, the really great roles are when you get older. For guys, they say like the best role for men are in their 30s and 40s. And that's sort of where I don't know, I never really thought of it as like transitioning from child actor to adult actor. It was always just working and enjoying working, because I think for me that was the most significant realization when I was younger, and because there was a choice that I had, because I started at a really young age, and neither of my parents were involved in acting or show business in any way, and so it wasn't their intent either. It was just something that happened. And I was lucky enough to have a family who supported me and encouraged me to do it. But I always really enjoyed it. And I think that was part of why I worked so much and so consistently. And it sort of propelled me early on to get experience really fast. You know, working as a child actor in New York, I was doing commercials and television shows and a little bit of theater. Like, I was just working all the time in all of these different ways, and that, you know, kind of gave me this foundation of like what an acting school or what an acting class would have given me. But there was a choice when I was 12, and because we had gone back and forth to do pilot season in Los Angeles, and I booked a pilot that that got picked up. And my parents sat me down and they said, okay, this is, to do this, we would have to move to California. And my family always came with me. It wasn't my dad or my mom. We never split. And that was really a testament to them and their decision. They never wanted to split the family up. So whenever we went to California for a pilot season or for a job, everybody came. And so they said, you know, is this something you like and enjoy and want to do? Because if you do, we're going to have to move. And also they wanted to move. It was sort of this thing of like, they support it, they want it, but at the same time, do you want it? Mm-hmm. And so
it's a lot of responsibility for a 12-year-old.
But it was also the benefit of like, but if you don't like it,
right,
then just say it. And I didn't feel that responsibility and or pressure because there wasn't any. It was just like, if this is what you want, we could do this, and if it's not, we don't have to do it. So it was at that point where and really almost around the same time where I realized that acting was something that I, you know, because as a kid, I didn't know what I was doing. I was not aware. I was just having fun.
Right.
It was just the attention. It was just the, you know, it was just really a great outlet for me in the same way like, you know, playing baseball or soccer was. It was just this outlet for my personality that I really enjoyed. And so it was around that time, too, that we moved and that I started to, you know, get bigger parts and stuff like that, where I realized that acting was like a serious job that you could, you know, be good at. And so that's also when I started to take it seriously myself. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I had that moment of being on a set as an adult until I was 21, 22, 23. And I was on set by myself because I had a guardian with me up until I was 18, mm-hmm. 19, which I was really grateful for because I felt very protected. But it wasn't until, you know, I was, you know, a young adult where I felt like a young adult. Mm-hmm.
You looked around and the guardian wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there anything you're working on now that you can talk about? Or?
Well, I wrote and directed a film mm-hmm. called Avenues that that just came out a couple of weeks ago, and it's on iTunes and Amazon and on demand everywhere. So that was something I worked on for pretty much all of my 20s. I was 21 when I wrote it, 26 when I made it, 31 when it came out. So that's something I'm really excited about because I love it, and it was sort of like a goal that I set for myself when I was 15. I told myself that by the time I'm 25, I would have written and directed a movie that I also acted in.
Cool.
Just a little bit of narcissism flowered in there, but no, it was just a goal of mine that I set it for the time for, you know, my 25-year-old self, and we went into production on 2 days before my 26th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like
yeah.
Just get it in.
Yeah.
Just like Nikki being born.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And you know, we look forward to seeing you maybe in This Is Us next season.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mary McNamara with the LA Times. Is that good? I forgot to ask you how are you.